I kind of fell into this knowledge that I was a medium. I didn't really even know. I knew that I was always intuitive, and I'd had experiences as a child that I could not explain and that were scary. So I literally just turned that off. At about 30, they pointed me out at church and asked if they can give me a message and told me I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. And I literally looked behind me, imagining they must have been talking to someone else because it must not be me. Right. The next morning, I wake up and I can sense at least 4 or 5 spirits in the bedroom with me.
Welcome to Seeds of Awakening on Mwani channel, and I have a wonderful guest with me, Bernette Sherman, who is a manifestation coach. She also has a love event that she created here in Atlanta, and she has an interesting story of how she started in traditional religion, but then had a sort of spiritual awakening. So welcome to the show, Bernette.
Thank you so much, Monty. I'm glad to be here.
So let's get into your background. How are you raised? And let's talk about your youth. What was your childhood like?
It's interesting. I grew up in several places and I was raised by my mother, who became a single mother when she left my father, her husband, when I was 2. And so I was raised partly upstate in Western New York. And there is when I kind of remember starting going to church. I was only 2, but I grew up in this non-traditional, but it was a Christian, Judeo-Christian religion called the Worldwide Church of God. And we went to church on Saturdays, we kept the holy days, we didn't celebrate many of the holidays. So it was this blend of, you know, traditional and non-traditional Christianity. But I grew up upstate and then moved back south, then moved back to Pittsburgh. And when I graduated from high school, I moved here to Atlanta.
Was it like a culture shock moving to the South?
When I was 10 and we moved, it was a little bit. When we only stayed a couple of years, it was in my mother's hometown though. So it wasn't as it wasn't as much of a culture shock because we did have family there.
And plus, when you're a kid, it's not, you can sort of adapt and you're not as indoctrinating your practices and your
Mhm.
habits and your routines. So I can see that.
It was a culture shock moving from South Carolina to Pittsburgh though. That
Gotcha.
was the culture shock.
What about it was challenging?
Well, when we moved, we didn't know anybody in Pittsburgh. My mother got a job. She took it. We moved. She told us before school started, she said, this school doesn't have very many Black people. I'm like, okay. Well, my first day, I didn't see a single other Black person until the last period of the day.
You're like, oh,
So it was a little bit of culture shock. I was a little bit in like, wow, this is not what I was expecting when she said not that many.
only one other one.
There were 10 in the whole school.
Wow, you can count them on your 2 hands.
Exactly. Exactly. So this
So,
was different.
so let's talk about the Atlanta experience. What did you learn? How was that going up here in Atlanta, then going through your teenage years and I guess going off to college?
It was interesting. I knew I was going to come to Atlanta my senior year. Part of the reason was on my on my birthday, which is in January, it was minus 22 with wind chill in Pittsburgh. And I decided I was not going to college up north. That became a non-starter. And so I was applying to schools, and I only applied to schools in the Atlanta area. So I knew I was coming here. At the time, I thought, it was booming for entertainment and the music industry. And I was interested in that at the time. And so that was a bonus. I had great colleges and I wanted the Black experience. So I started at Clark Atlanta so I could go to HBCU. And I loved it. I didn't leave.
So at this point, what did religion have a place in your life? What place did religion hold in your life during these years?
So I would say once I got here, there really wasn't. I wasn't doing anything with religion. I was going to school, I was working in a relationship. that was my life. When I was graduating from college, my mom said, "Oh, I heard about this church." And at the time, she was a Christian. And that's a whole nother story. But at the time, she was a Christian. And she told me to go to this. She wanted to take me to visit this church. And I went with her. I wasn't opposed to it. It was just, I didn't really think one way or the other about it. So I went with her and I had a great time. I was like, I'll go back. And I went back from then probably almost 3 years. I was attending there. I was in the choir, I was in groups and studies and really diving deep because I wanted, if I was going to be a Christian, like I try to do anything, if you're going to do anything, give it your all. And so I was trying to be a really good Christian and do it right. And so it played a huge part in my life for those 3 years.
Just 3 years of what happened after that.
So at the beginning of 2001, I was on the train. I had my Bible, and I was going to be reading my Bible on the train like I did most days. And another young lady had hers as well. She was about my age, and at the time I was 25. Telling my age, but I don't care. So she's on the train as well. And so we notice each other, start a conversation. She invites me to a Bible study. I'm like, cool, this is my thing. What I didn't realize, it was more like an intervention. It was,
For you, for intervention for you?
yeah. It was, I think it was these three ladies from, I think it was Church of God or some church they were all a part of. And they literally sat at a table. The three of them sat on one side, and there was a chair for me on the other side for this Bible study, which I thought was odd, right? And they start asking me questions about, like, how do I know I'm saved? What does salvation mean to me? And all of these things. And I'm like, I'm giving the answer that I think, and then they question that answer, which got me questioning the answer, which led me down a rabbit hole where I was like, am I saved? This was like suddenly a very big question because I no longer knew. I thought I was, but I was no longer sure. So I started studying. And for God, months, I would every night I was going through looking up salvation, hell, where did that originate? I was going to the library and pulling out books, and like I did back then, it was pretty big paper, like a 40-page paper of my leaving Christianity, because I mean, I really basically studied my way out of it because I got to a point where I was like, okay, I no longer have a reason to fear hell, but am I saved? So I was like, okay, got going more, and then I was like, well, what about the Trinity, and what about this? And before I knew it, as I said, my foundation was kind of crumbling, and it was really difficult though because I was struggling to have something to hold on to so I could still believe in this thing that I had committed several years of my life to.
So at
It was
this point,
hard.
what was your thought about like God and how did he play into this whole experience that you were having?
I'd gotten baptized, and I was one of those people because I am very intuitive. I knew that there was something else. I didn't know. When I came out of religion, it was almost like you swing so hard the other way. I almost felt like I'd broken up with like my lover, like, and I was just mad that I felt deceived. And I actually went to like the other side of like, well, I'm not an atheist, but I'm going to be agnostic because I really just don't know. So I rode the agnostic train for like a year, but the problem was I knew there was something because I could feel it, because I'd had experiences in that church that I could not explain any other way, but that there is something else, there's some kind of spiritual energy. And so maybe I probably tried just not to do anything. My August, it was August 2021 when I wrote the paper. I decided I was going to leave it behind me. And a month later, less than a month later, 9/11 happened, which shook up my world, everybody's world. And then less than a month later, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So it was like that shook up my world again. And so it was, I didn't really have time to think about religion anymore, but I wasn't worried about it.
Talk a little bit more about this paper. Why did you end up writing was it a manifesto? What exactly was this paper?
I'd done so much research, I had to write it down.
Oh,
And I
okay.
realized that I didn't realize that like I was really a writer. I just knew that I had to write it out. But I had to write it out, and because I had all this information, and at the time, the internet wasn't what it is today. But I did share it with other people. There was like there were forums, and I would share it in case other people had the same kind of questions I had to maybe shortcut their process
Mm.
because it was so much time. I spent so many hours, so much time writing it.
So you're kind of moving past religion now. How did you realize you were having a spiritual awakening? What did you attribute this new information to?
So in this zone of time, 20, so I'm about 26 now. I'm out of traditional religion. I'm not really into anything else. I started realizing that I actually am intuitive. And my daughter was about 4 when where I mentioned before that my mother was Christian, and she's the one who encouraged me to go to this church. I sent her the paper, which was not well received at first.
Going to hell.
Yes. She was very concerned about my soul, but as my mom, I can understand. She was very concerned about my soul and my well-being. I knew it was a changing point when a couple years later, she called me and asked me to send her that paper I'd sent her before. And I was like, okay, sure. And soon enough, she was out of it as well. But it was when she was going, working, well, volunteering and going to a spiritualist church in Rochester, New York. And I went with her. I kind of fell into this knowledge that I was a medium. I didn't really even know. I knew that I was always intuitive, and I'd had experiences as a child that I could not explain and that were scary. So I literally just turned that off because I couldn't explain what I was seeing and feeling, and that I believed that the monsters under my bed were actually real. They wasn't just my imagination. So I turned it off, and at about 30, I'm about 30, yeah, by this time I'm close to 30 years old. I learned I was a medium. They pointed me out at church and asked if they can give me a message and told me I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient. And I literally looked behind me, imagining they must have been talking to someone else because it must not be me. Right. And I'm just like kind of just like going along. I don't want to be rude. They said some other things like brought in a grandmother of mine, and they were accurate about some other things. And I was like, okay, no one's 100%. They just, that message about that was meant for someone else nearby and not me. That's what I thought. The next morning, I wake up and I can sense at least 4 or 5 spirits in the bedroom with me. It was like my grandmother, a childhood friend who'd passed, and a couple other people. And I was just like, oh, it was like a light switch just turned on just by being aware that it was so. And yeah, that was.
So I gotta ask you, when you were a child, you said the experiences were a little bit scary. What about the experiences scared you? And then as in your adult life, when you sort of have these spirits come back and you sense their
Mhm.
presence, did it kind of rekindle any of that fear, or what did you sense then?
So as a child, I didn't even know what to think. Like a shadow on the wall, kind of like that's kind of scary. Just feeling the sense that something's under your bed, something's in your room. And I wasn't one of those people who could see with the like physical eye. That would have just really taken me over. But I could feel it, I could sense it, there was shadows. And so it was just scary. And at night I would have sleep paralysis quite often, where I
Mm.
would literally feel like I was being held down, I couldn't move. And so that was scary and turned it off. As an adult, the first thing I did was set boundaries. First thing, literally that morning, I said, I understand that I may have this gift, but you all are not allowed to wake me up or keep me awake. That was the first boundary. Like, don't mess with my sleep. Yeah, and we can. And then it was as I learned more and grew more, I understood setting boundaries around who's allowed to come in, how they're allowed to come in, who I'm working with. And so I've been doing that for, I guess, almost 19, 20 years, something like that. But I've grown in that way. And now I don't necessarily do as much mediumship or doing readings for people, but I'm still connected. I still connect with my helpers, my guides,
Mhm.
um, in certain situations. If I need to help someone else connect with theirs in order to work through something, then that's more of how I do it.
So what do you do now? You said you don't do a lot of mediumship now. What's your main I guess business, or what's your main venture now?
So funny you should ask. Trying. I'm trying to do less, and that's been my thing is doing less and really being able to manifest more by doing less. And I gave up writing books. Let me rephrase that. I gave up writing novels. At the end of last year, I said I'm not going to write any more novels. My goal is not to do one-on-one coaching. And right now, I'm leaving myself open for what does the next step look like. Speaking is something I do. Love Fest will be keeping me busy. It's a very big project to pull off a festival like that. Um, but helping people manifest their their dreams, their love relationships, their abundance, joy, well-being. I've got a 4-week wellness program that people can take independently. And, I've got books. So those are kind of the ways that I'm serving others in addition to, speaking and sharing some of the knowledge that I've learned about manifestation over my decades.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you don't consider yourself a Christian any longer.
I haven't been a Christian in almost 24 years.
How do you balance that whole train of thought with being saved and the whole salvation and knowing that you're approved by God? And do you feel like your form of worship is acceptable?
For me, it is. And I think that's all that matters is I understand that there is a great power out there. And even my system of what I understand is going to be different than a lot of new thought people or people who consider themselves spiritual because I don't necessarily see it as a lot of new thought people want to see it as all good. Everything is all good, all God, that everything is always working out in your favor. And it's not quite what I've channeled and discovered on my own and in other ways.
What have you discovered on your own?
Well, and this is just my own experience.
Of
And I
course
have
it
to say this,
is.
my own experience, and everyone has a unique interpretation.
Mhm.
But I don't believe that the universe is necessarily good. I believe it's neutral and it's a responder to us. It can only do what we do. So our energy is going to tune into some frequency and it's going to activate what's on that frequency.
Mhm.
If you are extremely negative, the universe is going to appear very negative for you. If you're very positive, it's going to appear very positive. And if that's the case for the universe, that's going to extend to other beings in the universe, including, I believe, our understanding of a divine source. I don't want to get too deep into it, but yeah, I believe that we have this understanding of like this one God who is all good. But if you look at the Bible, there's probably a reason why God had so many different names and seemed sometimes to be a little bit bipolar in the Bible.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm on theories about that, but definitely.
so maybe there's more than one God.
Maybe there's one big God and there's a bunch of fragments of God. Who knows?
You're right, like, but I don't believe that there's just like this one and it's always never changing, always constant, which probably puts me in like a very small little bubble of, you know, people who aren't Christian and aren't some other religion. And but I realize that um, even with me having that understanding for myself, I'm able to show up in my life with power because I'm able to, you can activate your power and you can manifest and create the life you want just by tapping into the universal flow, the universal energy.
How do people go about doing that for those maybe watching, they're just getting introduced to this whole idea about maybe spirituality?
Well, everything starts with ourselves and our own energy. And one of the biggest parts of that is love. And where love is lacking, you will not be able to manifest positive. You won't be able to manifest things that you actually want to manifest. You will manifest, but it won't be things that you really want. Or it'll be things that you think you want, but aren't necessarily in your highest good because you're coming from a place of lack in the area of love. So first is, loving yourself. And I won't say fully and completely because how many people are going to be able to do that, but loving yourself as much as you can and being willing to continually work on that.
Mm.
And that includes healing, that includes activation, that includes rewriting your story. It's a whole lot of stuff. It's from the mindset to just core spiritual principles, but doing that piece, knowing what it is that you're trying to create, like having a clear picture of what you want to create, and not in the way that it has to be like this perfect, I'm going to create something that is blue that costs $20,000 and it's going to be delivered on March 13th. We don't need to be that specific, but you do need to know what it is, what is the feeling, what is the energy that you're trying to experience from what you're trying to create. And I think that's the big thing. What do you want to feel? What's that? What's the energy you're trying to create? Because that's the thing that's out there. That's how you bring it in. You have to match your energy with the energy of what it is you're trying to create and get into the flow with it. And then stay locked in. Stay locked in because it can be coming to you. Your energy shifts, you
And you
change your mind,
mess it all up.
and it was just this close, and it's like, poof, it's gone. And you're like, what happened? I could feel it. Yes. And then you let the feeling go, and it's gone. And then you got to start over, bring like, yeah, bringing it back in again.
Do you feel like more people are starting to have the thoughts or the feelings or the experiences that you experienced when you started to have your spiritual awakening? Do you feel like we're sort of reaching a point where more people are maybe stepping outside their traditional religion or the way they were raised?
To an extent, It's interesting. There was just a study that came out saying that the wave of people leaving religion, like traditional religion, has kind of stopped. So there was a big wave where lots of people were leaving it. And now it's kind of just leveled out. But I don't know that people are necessarily going to church as much. Are they considering themselves spiritual? So they still believe in something, but maybe they're not as active in a traditional religion. I think we are finding that more and more people are open to the idea that there's something else. A lot of people don't know necessarily what it is, but there's something else and people are exploring it.
Mm,
And things like this, what you're doing, uh, are going to help that.
definitely. I want to talk about your Love Fest and that festival and what did that look like and what do you hope to accomplish with having hosting it?
Oh, yes. So as one of the co-founders, we we had this vision of creating an event that singles and couples could come to and enjoy different workshops and activities, party, and have fun, and experience love, community love, relational, learning about it, just be surrounded by that energy. And so this year, we probably did more than we needed to do. So another thing of doing less to have more, because we did 3 nights. It was like a very long weekend. We did 3 nights and we had workshops on relationships, sexologists, we had comedy, parties and awards. It was a whole a whole weekend of activity, but it was well received and people, it almost felt like coming together.
I feel like we all need a little bit of love in our lives, whether we need to heal our childhood, our inner child, or whether we need to just improve ourselves or our bodies. Everybody sort of needs to be on the low frequency.
Yes, yes. And next year we plan on doing a lot of the same things, just condensing it instead of spreading it across so many days, maybe do it a day or day and a half,
Hmm.
but offering other workshops, doing the party, doing events to help people handle and learn more about relationships, love, self-love. I plan on doing a workshop on self-love and healing. And so there's this idea that love, people think love and they're like, oh, relationships. Well, that's just one part. The romantic love is just one aspect. For me personally, the biggest thing is starting with ourselves and
Hmm.
self-love. And when you do that, when you start with yourself and you heal yourself and you love yourself, everything else flows from that. Like the key to manifestation, I believe, is in self-love to an extent. There are some people who are able to manifest because I won't call them stubborn, but they're a little bit stubborn. And they lock into a frequency, and it doesn't matter what else is going on. Now, what they manifest, how they manifest is going to be different, but you can. But if you manifest with love, what you get out will be with love. And so the energy of it is going to feel better because you've put in good stuff, so you get good stuff out.
That's excellent. All right, so we're kind of towards the end of our time together. I do have a couple of rapid fire questions that I want to ask that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
The first question is, how would you explain or what's your definition of a spiritual awakening?
Oh, my definition of a spiritual awakening is when you become open and curious about what is unknown outside of what you can see.
Great answer. Next question is, what's the most valuable lesson that you feel like you've learned thus far in your life?
That one's not rapid fire. The most valuable lesson I've learned thus far in my
We
life.
got a couple minutes. You can take your time with it.
The one I'm still working on is patience. Patience with myself, and the one that I'm currently sitting with and learning is that I don't have to prove myself by doing so much. that my worth is not tied to how much I produce.
Hmm.
And that's where I'm at now.
It's not tied to the financial either. Like a lot of people have this, I got to be successful in life, but that's really not a benchmark that I think the creator even measures us by. Everybody has some value that they can give to others in some kind of way.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
The last question is, what would be your advice to someone who is going through a spiritual awakening, or they're starting to question, they're starting to have sensations, maybe they're starting to feel that something is amiss? What would be your advice to them?
Be open to learning, but also be mindful of who you choose to learn from. So be open, be curious, but there's a lot out there that people don't understand. And I think spiritually, people get themselves into trouble by doing all the things without really understanding what they're opening themselves up to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Where would people go to learn more about you or your events or your Love Fest? Is there any website or um
absolutely. So Love Fest is Love Fest ATL, like Atlanta, lovefestatl.com. And on Facebook and Instagram, it's Love Fest ATL. And then my website is BernettesHerman.com. So my first name, last name. And I'm on Instagram as I am Bernette. I am trying to do less Facebook, but I am on there as I am Bernette Sherman.
that's
But
how I found you.
yeah, yes. So that's how you can find me.
Bernette, I want to thank you for spending a few moments with us, sharing your story, and good luck with your festival and all this to come to you.
Thank you so much, Amani. I appreciate it.